A knight's story is not about heroes or victories or names that history remembers. History is written in moments of fire and noise, but most lives are lived far from those moments. This tale is about someone ordinary living quietly while the world changed somewhere else. These are the forgotten footnotes, the lives that continued between great events. There is nothing you need to follow closely, just listen and let it unfold. The planet had no horizon in the way people once meant it. There were no oceans to catch the light, no continents to break the view into shapes that could be named. From orbit, it appeared as a single, continuous lattice of illumination, a web of structures layered upon structures, glowing softly through the artificial night. This was the capital of the galaxy, though few who lived here ever felt its importance in their daily steps. Long ago, scholars had borrowed an ancient word to describe places like this: ecumenopolis, a city that consumed an entire world, not simply spread across the surface but driven downward, pressed layer upon layer into the planet's crust. Streets stacked on streets, lives stacked on lives. For generations, this world had been the seat of governance. Treaties were signed here. Decisions affecting billions were debated in chambers most citizens would never see. Yet despite its power, the planet was calm, predictable, safe. Peace had lasted so long that it no longer felt like an achievement. Conflicts happened elsewhere, at the edges of maps, in places most people here could not name. News of them arrived softened by distance and time. No one alive remembered a galaxy-spanning war. No one living had grown up under rationing, conscription, or bombardment. The idea of such things belonged to archives and dramatized histories, not to lived memory. On this planet, life moved in cycles of shifts, commutes, and scheduled maintenance. People planned futures measured in levels climbed, permits granted, apartments upgraded. The city endured, the systems worked. At the time, there was no reason to believe this day would be any different. He was born far below the surface, in a level where the ceiling lights never dimmed enough to suggest night. Down there, time was measured by shift rotations and energy cycles rather than by sunrise or sunset. Children learned early that above and below were not directions so much as conditions of life. The lower levels were old, not ancient. Nothing on this planet was allowed to become ancient, but worn in the way that comes from long, uninterrupted use. Walls bore the smoothness of countless hands brushing past. Corridors curved gently, shaped as much by habit as by design. The air carried a constant vibration, the distant hum of machinery supporting the weight of the city above. People lived close together. Privacy existed, but only in fragments. Sounds traveled easily, footsteps, conversations, the low murmur of transit systems passing behind walls. Everyone learned to tune most of it out. Silence was a luxury reserved for higher levels. His earliest memories were of depth, looking up into shafts that vanished into shadow. The idea of the surface existed as a concept, something spoken about carefully, the way people spoke of rare opportunities or unlikely futures. Still, people hoped, quietly, persistently. Hope traveled upward more easily than bodies ever did. By the time he reached adulthood, he no longer lived where he was born. That alone was considered success. Each relocation upward required approvals, waiting lists, and proof of stability. Advancement was slow, but it was possible, and that possibility shaped lives more than ambition ever could. His current home sat several levels higher than his childhood dwelling. The ceilings were taller here, the lighting slightly warmer. There were fewer people per corridor, fewer shared facilities. It wasn't luxury, but it felt like breathing more deeply than before. From time to time, he would pause in transit hubs and look at the directory maps. Colored bands indicated depth, each shade representing a range of levels. The surface sat far above, marked by symbols he rarely studied for long. Looking too closely at it made the distance feel heavier. Still, he told himself that progress did not need to be dramatic. It It could be incremental, measured. A life could be built one level at a time. He worked more hours than required, saved where he could, lived simply, not because he dreamed of wealth or recognition, but because upward movement required margin, and margin was something you had to manufacture carefully. Sometimes, when he allowed himself to think ahead, he imagined a future where someone else, someone younger, might benefit from his patience. Not a specific person, just the idea of it. The thought was enough. What follows is remembered quietly, not as history, but as it was lived.
I leave early, before the main traffic begins. The lifts are quieter then, carrying mostly workers and automated freight. I like the stillness of those hours, when the city feels less like a machine and more like a collection of individuals moving independently through shared space. The lift descends in stages, stopping briefly at transit exchanges before continuing downward. Through the transparent panels, the vertical tunnel opens beneath us, vast and cylindrical, disappearing into darkness. Ships pass in both directions, some rising toward the surface, others descending deeper into the planet, bound for levels I've never visited and likely never will. I watch their lights drift by, steady and unhurried. No one rushes in the tunnel. Everything moves according to schedules that have been refined over decades. There's comfort in that. Predictability feels like safety when you've lived your whole life inside a system too large to comprehend fully. As we travel, I think about nothing in particular. The mind settles into familiar paths during the commute. Small observations, half-formed thoughts, the awareness of movement without effort. When the lift finally slows and opens, I step out without ceremony. Another day, beginning exactly where the last one ended. My work takes place above ground, though the phrase is misleading. The surface exists somewhere above us, but I rarely think about it while I'm there. The landing platforms hover in controlled suspension, anchored by fields and supports that hum softly beneath my boots. Ships arrive throughout the day. Mid-sized transports, diplomatic couriers, private vessels carrying people who will never learn my name. They settle onto the platforms, rest briefly, then depart toward the inner city or deeper levels. My job is to make sure that nothing about that process fails. I inspect panels, run diagnostics, replace worn components. The work is precise, but not demanding, in a way that requires constant attention. Once you've learned the systems, they become familiar, almost conversational. A vibration out of place, a delay where there shouldn't be one. The platforms tell you when something is wrong, if you know how to listen. I like that about the work. Problems announce themselves. Solutions are usually clear. When something breaks, it can be fixed. When it doesn't, it's left alone. There's no ambiguity in that, no hidden layers. From time to time, I pause and look out across the city. Endless structures stretch in every direction, disappearing into atmospheric haze. It's beautiful in a way that doesn't demand attention. It simply exists. The days blend together easily. That's another thing I appreciate. Routine smooths the edges of time, makes it easier to move through without resistance. I know what each shift will bring, more or less. I know when breaks will come, when the light will change, when it will be time to clean up and log my hours. Some people complain about repetition. They say it makes life smaller. I've never understood that. Repetition gives shape to days. It turns chaos into sequence. When everything else in the galaxy feels impossibly large, there's comfort in tasks that begin and end predictably. I take pride in doing the work well, even though no one notices when it's done correctly. That's the nature of maintenance. Success looks like nothing happening at all. Sometimes, while tightening a final bolt or sealing a panel, I imagine the ship that will rest here next, where it's coming from, where it's going. Those thoughts pass quickly. The platforms don't encourage speculation. They exist to serve motion, not to reflect on it. When the shift ends, I feel the familiar ache in my hands and shoulders. It's not unpleasant. It's proof that the day has been used. The news reaches me indirectly. A hollow screen mounted near one of the access corridors flickers to life, with a headline as I pass. An explosion, a ship, recently arrived, passengers described as significant, though the specifics scroll by too quickly to absorb fully. The word attack appears, then investigation, then a reminder that authorities have the situation under control. I slow for a moment, reading what I can before the screen updates again. There's no footage of violence, no dramatic imagery, just text and a still image of a ship I don't recognize. Around me, the platforms continue their rhythm. Another vessel descends. Tools hum. A supervisor speaks quietly into a comm unit, discussing something unrelated. I feel nothing in particular. Concern, perhaps, but distant. Attacks happen. They always have. Somewhere. This one just happened closer than usual. I file the information away without urgency and return to my task. The platform doesn't care what's happened elsewhere. It requires attention now. By the time my shift ends, the details have already begun to blur. New information replaces the old, speculation layered atop incomplete facts. I hear snippets of conversation as I store my tools, fragments of analysis that never quite coalesce into anything solid. I don't join in. There's nothing I could add, and nothing I feel the need to resolve. The day has reached its natural conclusion, and I'm content to let it end there. I sign out, secure my locker, and make my way toward the transit lines. The city absorbs me again. Just another figure moving along prescribed paths. On certain days, I go straight home after work. On others, I follow a different route, one that takes me briefly above ground. Today is one of those days. The diner sits above ground, pressed between transit hubs and access ramps. It's not remarkable in any architectural sense, but it's busy at all hours. Travelers stop in while waiting for connections. Workers pass through at the end of long shifts. Conversations overlap in dozens of languages, most of which I don't understand. Humans are rare here. No one stares. No one comments. Diversity is so complete that it stops being notable. Everyone is just another shape at the counter, another voice in the ambient noise. I like the anonymity of it. No one here knows where I'm from or where I'm going. I'm not defined by my level or my job. I'm just a customer. The owner nods when I enter. Not recognition exactly, more like acknowledgement of a familiar pattern. I take my usual seat at the counter and set my bag down at my feet. I order the same drink every time. Blue-green, slightly sweet, cool enough to be refreshing without numbing my mouth. I don't know what most of the ingredients are, and I don't ask. It's consistent. That's enough. As I wait, I watch the hollow displays mounted along the wall behind the counter. The news plays silently. Images cycling through scenes of buildings, officials, charts. Without sound, it all feels abstract, like a simulation of importance rather than importance itself. The drink arrives, and I take the first slow sip. The taste is familiar, grounding. Small rituals matter more than people like to admit. They anchor you when everything else feels too large to hold. Around me, conversations ebb and flow. Someone laughs. Someone else argues softly. The diner absorbs it all without changing. For a moment, the galaxy feels very far away. That's when I notice the robed figure. They stand near the end of the counter, close to the owner, their posture angled inward in a way that suggests privacy rather than secrecy. Their voice is low, indistinct against the ambient noise of the diner. I wouldn't have paid attention at all, if not for the way the owner leans closer, listening intently. Between them, resting on the counter, is a small object, metallic, cylindrical, unremarkable in every way except for its shape. It looks like a bullet. The thought surprises me. Weapons aren't common sights here, at least not openly. I watch for a moment longer, curious more than alarmed. The object is picked up, turned slightly, then covered by the robed figure's sleeve. Whatever is being discussed concludes quickly. The figure inclines their head, steps back, and disappears into the flow of patrons without drawing attention. The owner returns to their work as if nothing unusual has occurred. I realize I've been staring and look back to my drink. I feel no fear, no sense of imminent danger. The moment registers as strange, then slips easily into the category of things that don't concern me. The city is full of moments like that, brief intersections with lives and events that never touch your own again. If you treated each one as significant, you'd never be able to move forward. I finish my drink slowly, savoring the last of the sweetness. When I set the empty glass down, it leaves a faint ring of condensation on the counter. It will evaporate in a minute or two. My friend arrives later than usual. I hear him before I see him, his footsteps heavier than normal as he approaches the counter. He drops into the seat beside me with a tired exhale, his shoulders slumped forward. He looks worn in a way that goes beyond fatigue. There's a tension in his movements, a distraction that doesn't quite release even when he's sitting still. He orders something warm, but barely touches it when it arrives. I ask how his day was, though I already sense the answer won't be simple. He tells me he was assigned to clean up the ship from the news. He doesn't go into details at first, just speaks in fragments, circling the subject as if approaching it too directly might make it harder to say. He talks about damage patterns, about how quickly the area was sealed, about how certain information never made it to the public feeds. Then he starts talking about history, not dates or battles, but rhythms. He says peace doesn't end all at once. It thins, it stretches, it becomes procedural. He says emergency powers are never temporary in the way people expect. He says militaries don't expand because nothing is going to happen. His voice stays low, even though no one is listening. I let him talk. I don't interrupt. There's a kind of relief in being heard, even if you're not believed. When he finishes speaking, there is a pause between us that lasts longer than it should. Not because I'm searching for words, but because I'm weighing whether they are even necessary. The diner hums around us, a low, constant sound made of movement, voices, and distant machinery. Nothing about the space suggests urgency. I tell him what seems obvious to me, that the galaxy has been peaceful for longer than anyone can remember firsthand. That instability has become an abstraction, something studied rather than endured. I remind him that systems exist precisely to prevent the kind of collapse he's describing. that emergency procedures are safeguards, not warnings. I don't raise my voice. I don't argue forcefully. There's no need. These aren't beliefs I've constructed defensively. They're simply the assumptions I've grown up with. Peace has shaped my expectations, the way gravity shapes posture. You don't think about it unless something goes wrong. I mentioned that no one alive has lived through a true galaxy-spanning war. Not really. Stories exist, of course, preserved and retold. But stories lack weight. They don't press down on your days or alter your routines. They remain contained in archives and dramatizations, safely removed from ordinary life. He listens. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't counter my points. That unsettles me more than disagreement would have. People usually argue when they're convinced they're right. Silence feels like certainty of a different kind. Eventually, he nods once, as if acknowledging something beyond the conversation itself. We finish our drinks without speaking. When we stand to leave, nothing has been resolved, but nothing feels urgent either. Later that evening, I eat below ground in one of the shared canteens, not far from my apartment. The space is functional, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Long tables, durable surfaces, lighting that never quite softens enough to feel warm. I pour soup from a dispenser into a shallow bowl and carry it to an open seat. The soup tastes the same as it always does, mildly savory, filling, forgettable. It's not meant to be enjoyed. It's meant to sustain. Around me, others eat quietly. Some stare at personal screens. Others sit with their thoughts, shoulders slumped, hands wrapped loosely around cups or utensils. Conversations are sparse and subdued, never rising above the ambient hum of ventilation and distant transit lines. No one mentions the attack. No one speculates about emergency sessions or special powers. If the news plays anywhere, it's on muted screens mounted high on the walls, easily ignored. This is what peace looks like from here. Not celebration or relief, just continuity, the absence of disruption, the ability to finish a meal without wondering if it will be interrupted. I eat slowly, not because I'm savoring the food, but because there's nowhere else I need to be. When I'm done, I return the bowl to its place and step back into the corridor, blending into the steady flow of people heading home. Over the next few days, the language of the news shifts. It becomes heavier, more deliberate. Emergency sessions are announced, then extended. Statements are released, emphasizing unity, preparedness, resolve. The phrasing is careful, almost soothing. Every declaration is paired with reassurance, temporary measures, limited scope, necessary precautions. I watch these updates the way I watch weather reports for distant regions, acknowledging that something is happening without feeling personally affected by it. The events described feel real, but far away, separated from my daily life by layers of bureaucracy and distance. At work, nothing changes. Ships continue to arrive and depart. Maintenance schedules remain full. Supervisors speak about efficiency and safety protocols, not about politics or conflict. The platforms hum beneath my feet, steady and reliable. Whatever decisions are being made above us, the machinery of the city continues to function exactly as it always has. I notice that I've stopped trying to follow the details. The specifics blur together, replaced by a general sense of escalation without substance. It's not ignorance, it's prioritization. There's only so much attention a person can spare for things they cannot influence. My apartment greets me each night with the same stillness. It's small, but deliberately arranged. The bed is narrow, pressed against one wall. The desk sits beneath the window, its surface worn smooth by years of use. A single chair faces outward, angled toward the view. There's very little here that isn't necessary. I've never felt the urge to fill the space with decoration. Empty areas feel restful rather than incomplete. After dinner, I wash my hands and sit for a while without doing anything in particular. The city's distant vibrations seep through the walls, constant but unobtrusive. They've been there my entire life, a reminder that the structure holding me up is vast and active, even when I'm still. I think about a day, but not in sequence. Images surface without order. The platform, the diner, my friend's expression when he spoke. None of it demands resolution. Eventually, I move to the desk. The window opens onto a vertical tunnel that drops far below my level. A vast cylindrical void threaded with transit lanes. Ships descend through it constantly, their lights forming slow-moving lines before fading into darkness. I watch them without tracking individual vessels. The movement itself is what holds my attention. Downward motion, uninterrupted, steady. Sometimes I wonder where they're going. Lower residential levels, industrial zones, places I've never seen, places I likely never will. The thought doesn't bother me. Not every path needs to be followed to be acknowledged. I also wonder, briefly, if the people aboard those ships are thinking about the same news I've been seeing. If they feel concern, excitement, fear, or if they're focused on their own routines, their own narrow slices of the city. The lights disappear one by one. More follow. The tunnel never empties. Eventually, I lean back in the chair and let my gaze soften, no longer focusing on any particular movement. I keep a simple journal. It's not detailed. I don't record events the way historians do, marking dates and outcomes. I write impressions instead. How the day felt. What stood out. What passed without notice. Some nights, I write more than others. Tonight, I note the steadiness of things, the sameness of routine, the way the city seems untouched by the urgency in the news. I don't write about the future. I've learned that fixing ideas in words can make them feel heavier than they need to be. Possibility is easier to carry when it remains undefined. When I finish, I close the journal and place it back in the drawer. The act feels ceremonial, even though no one will ever read it. I sit for a while longer, listening to the hum of the city, before preparing for sleep. Days pass, then more days. The rhythm holds. Work continues. Commutes repeat. Meals are eaten and forgotten. The diner remains busy. The smoothie tastes the same. The news grows louder, its tone sharpening as statements grow more definitive. Announcements replace discussions. Decisions replace deliberation. Yet nothing in my immediate surroundings reflects the weight of those words. No additional security, no visible forces, no disruptions to the flow of daily life. At some point, I realize I've stopped expecting change, not because I believe nothing will happen, but because anticipation itself has grown tiring. Waiting requires energy. Acceptance does not. The city endures in its own way, indifferent to the narratives forming around it. Eventually, the phrasing shifts again. Emergency powers are granted. Military expansion is authorized. The language is firm now, confident, presented as necessary and inevitable. I listen to the announcement while standing in line for transit. People around me glance at the screen briefly, then return to their own thoughts. No one reacts strongly. Later that day, I look for signs of change, more patrols, new restrictions, something tangible. There's nothing. The platforms operate as usual. Ships come and go. Maintenance schedules remain full. If this is the beginning of something larger, it's a beginning that leaves no mark where I stand. The smoothie at the diner tastes the same as it always has. The color hasn't shifted. The sweetness hasn't changed. The soup below ground remains bland and filling. Routine endures, stubborn and reassuring. It forms a quiet barrier between my life and the enormity of what's being discussed elsewhere. I begin to understand why history feels sudden when viewed in retrospect. Change rarely announces itself where it's least expected. A week passes. I realize, with some surprise, that I've stopped waiting for something to happen. The tension I hadn't acknowledged fades, replaced by a steadier calm. If change is coming, it hasn't reached me yet, and until it does, there's work to be done, meals to eat, sleep to get. Life, as it turns out, is persistent. Occasionally, my thoughts return to the diner, to the robed figure, to the small metallic object resting briefly on the counter. I wonder if it was important, if it marked the beginning of something, or if meaning only gathered around it afterward, assigned by memory rather than intent. There's no way to know. Some questions don't resolve themselves. They simply fade with time, becoming footnotes in personal histories no one else will read. Sometimes, usually late at night, I think about higher levels, about spaces where light isn't manufactured, where windows open onto sky instead of stone. I imagine what it might be like to wake up there. What kind of people live without the constant awareness of weight pressing down? I don't imagine myself there, just the idea of it. Possibility, carried forward, life continues. That feels important. More important than declarations or projections. As long as people wake up, go to work, share meals, and return home, something of value remains intact. Hope doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it's just the absence of collapse. Another ship disappears into the depths of the tunnel, its lights dimming as it descends, just like the others before it. The city breathes. The systems hold. For now.
History remembers the moments when everything changed, but most lives continue quietly beneath those moments. This was one of them.